Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about The Hero of Ages, Book 3 in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. So, um, this book takes place shortly after, or not shortly, a couple years after the events of Book 2. And the primary focus of this book is the effects of um, Vin releasing Ruin from the Well of Ascension. So it deals a lot more with what I would say is the mystical rather than I feel like we've moved from the first book, which was very while it had mystical elements to it, it was very concrete and very much like this nitty gritty I don't want to say spy story, but almost this infiltration type tale and using more clever ways to start a rebellion rather than just we're going to fight. Um, this book has moved significantly away from that book, I would say, where we get a lot of fighting and conquest and dealing with these really strange and godlike elements of the Mistborn world. So, there's good and bad things about that. Um, Overall, with this book, I think a big positive is that we do get a little bit more time with um, Spook, who is a character we've kind of ignored up to this point. He's kind of just been in the background. And I like how Sanderson uses his character and kind of incorporates that him feeling this element of being left out because he was a background character. He wasn't really part of the main group, and that actually affects his character within this story. So I thought that was really well done and super interesting. I think I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but I think I might have to really talk about it because my other positive is a huge spoiler. So we'll go into some critiques first before we go into some spoiler stuff. So some critiques I have about this book is that I feel like Vin and Ellen almost have their story is important to this book, but they don't seem to really be the center of attention anymore. It's more focused on, I would say, I feel like Spook and Sazed's story is more the heart of this story. While Vin and Ellen are still prominently told about, we don't really get a whole lot of character growth at this point. They're kind of settled into who they are. And their story, I don't want to say is predictable, but is very I feel like it goes on for a little bit too long. We get these long parts of them dragging out with this siege and with their chasing down, and it takes them a long time to get the information they need. And I'm wondering if that could have been cut down a little bit to make the story a little bit more fast paced, because I felt like the pacing in this book is just really, really slow compared to that of even looking back at the first book, which I think is my favorite book of this trilogy. I never felt like I was being dragged down by parts of the story. I felt like every part of the story served a purpose, whereas in this, I feel like a lot of the story involved with Ellen and Vin and the siege is more focused on denying them and denying us, the reader, information and putting pieces in place for the antagonistic forces rather than I guess that probably is more of the reason why it rubs me a little bit the wrong way talking through it like that. Is it's probably because it makes them feel very passive in a story which they've always had agency before. Like, I feel like they just kind of get pushed through this story rather than actually making like everything they do is like manipulated by someone else rather than them actually taking their own agency and doing what they need to do. Whereas with Spook and Sazed, that's reversed. They have a lot of agency in this story, and even though there is some manipulation going on, it serves a purpose, and they still make active choices to do. Okay, let's go into some spoiler stuff. So if you don't want any spoilers for the book, I understand. See you later. Hopefully you'll come back and watch the rest of this video. But hopefully you've already read this book and we can talk a little bit about spoilers. And because one of my favorite parts of this book is the choice of making Sazed the hero of ages rather than Vin. I think there could have been a little bit more setup and like hints throughout, especially throughout this book, but I think even throughout book 2, maybe even throughout book 1, but I don't think he was thinking about this story in book 1. I feel like book 2 and book 3 were written as a reaction because book 1 did so well. But maybe he had the story in mind from the entire time. He just didn't want to include those pieces in the first book. But this was one of the first Sanderson series that I completed, and it very much hit me off guard at the time. Like, now I know when I've read through it multiple times that this is coming. I still really like the choice. I think that Sazed as a character is like the way that the powers and gods and stuff like that work and it's set up, it makes sense for him to take control of these godlike powers. And I feel like he's a character who actually like deserves it. And I feel like Vin is a character who, well, I don't think it's not that she doesn't deserve it, but it just doesn't fit her character as well. I feel like she's always been the character that, while she's very powerful, she doesn't really want more power. She wants like these things to stop and for her to be able to like take a break. I think that the ending fight with Elend and against Sokolos and all his soldiers and stuff like that, I think is really, really cool. I think that's a really a way that we're denied information because the antagonist is denied information, and that gives their actions, when he's like, joke's on you, we win. It's like, wait. And you start thinking through it, and then like when he reveals it, I think that's a really cool, like, yeah, even though we all died, we still beat you because we took away the one thing that you were coming here for in the first place. Which I think is a very much Ellen thing to do. I think that's a really cool use of that setup, and a use of like this really cool action scene, even though it's kind of hopeless. He finds like that silver lining that like, okay, we lost the battle, but we denied you a strategic resource that you wanted. So we were going to die anyway. So you didn't really get anything from us. I do think that the element with Vin at the end too, with Vin battling Ruin like that, is also pretty cool. I think that her coming to terms and like not really being sad that Ellen dies, but actually like accepting that and then realizing that like, hey, you done goofed, kid, because I don't have a reason to live, and that means I can take you out, so that neither of us are a threat anymore. Talking about all this though, definitely don't feel like it hit me like this time as it did the first time I read this series. Like I think this is the third or fourth time I've gone through this entire series, which I like to do before I do reviews. Even if I've read a series multiple times, I like to go back and reread just to kind of get it fresh in my head. The first time that I read this, it really didn't like this book. Like parts of it sat well with me. I really liked the return to some of the balls and stuff like that, and like, you know, those elements of the book, the more like slow, like person on person elements, which I think is what I've liked through this whole series, versus the end of the world elements that are on throughout the entire book. While that has definitely, like, my first time through, I was like, this does not sit well with me. This time through, I still think that the stake of the world ending in this book feels very hollow. And I never once believed that this world's just gonna poof and disappear. Like, there was always gonna be a way out of it. I think the way out of it is cool. I just think the stake itself is kind of meh. And I think that maybe if the stakes had been set up a little bit differently, that I would have been more invested in this book in particular. Yeah. Overall, I think this book is like, I think this series is like a good series. I think that the first book is almost a masterpiece of this series, and then book 2 and book 3 are like, all right. They're pretty good. Anything all right for Sanderson is pretty good for most authors. But the payoff is that it sets up stuff for, you know, generation 2 of this series, which I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be recording and reviewing those pretty quick here, because that's actually why I wanted to reread these, because I actually really wanted to read generation 2 as well, which I think is super, like, this helps set up that, as well as setting up other parts of the Cosmere, which has impacts that I have felt later down the line, and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. I like that. While this book and these books in particular did not hit me as hard as I would have liked, the effects that they have this like ripple throughout other books in his universe. So I really enjoyed that, and I think that if you're into fantasy, like, these books are like you probably should read these, especially if you want to do fantasy writing. I think these are definitely books you should read, just because they have a lot of good character elements and different pieces of writing that I think anyone could learn from. But I think that's going to be it for this review, guys. So if you like the video, be sure to like. We can talk about it. If other people have different opinions and thoughts about this, I have talked about the Mistborn Generation 1 books quite a bit, but I really enjoy talking about them, and I like to get some other perspectives on what's going on with them. So, all right. I hope to see you guys next time.